Right now it's like. Feel free to grab some pizza and drinks. We'll just get rolling here to be time conscious. So for the panel, we're going to be moving through 3 different themes. So the first theme that we're going to be starting with is what separates successful AI deployments from failed ones. So starting off on your end, Jenna, when you first start working with a new brand, what do you find is missing typically in their data or context for a successful AI agent?
Yeah, usually when I'm having conversations with your either prospects or clients, they actually have tons of data, but it's not connected. So the problem is that they've been using AI, trying to build AI systems, but all the data is fragmented. A lot of times they haven't even connected any MCPs or external tools to their cloud instance, because either they don't know how or there are security hurdles there. So I think the first step there is use the data you have as soon as possible to connect to cloud, and that's really good low-hanging fruit. And the second thing is that a lot of people have knowledge and expertise that's undocumented, because traditionally we're not used to agents scanning all of our workplaces and Slack. So a lot of people are having conversations in DMs that aren't being captured by always on agents, or we're having, I'm recording calls, please fellow, we're having conversations on calls and we're making leadership decisions, or we're videoing things with the agents never getting that information because it's not connected. So connect your MCPs, make sure your tools are connected, and start having conversations in public channels, recorded meetings, to make sure that everything's in a visible space and the agents are always learning.
Awesome, thank you. It sounds like you have really strong approaches for how to tackle that gap.
Yes, I'm very enthusiastic about that part of it.
Wonderful. Ugo, over to yourself. What do you find when you're deploying agents at scale the biggest misconception is?
So, can you hear me? Yeah. So the biggest misconception that I have seen is that you start thinking about scale first. You want to solve the problem at a very basic level, and then almost sort of build on top of that. You don't want to, as they say, that this is a cliche, boil the ocean, right? So when you solve the first problem, you look at how to scale it, then you go the next step, and the next, and the next. But I think sometimes people get bogged down in projects where they have chosen a very large scope, and they end up firefighting for most of the project and not really getting to anything concrete. So, and one thing I've also noticed is that when you have that quick win, everyone tends to buy in and believe that this is something that is going somewhere, versus people start to lose trust, hope in what this is, and then it sort of fizzles out. So I think the biggest thing is more so trying your best to get those quick wins and gradually build on top of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So having a very focused problem statement to get things rolling, and then have scale as a secondary mission statement. Awesome. Okay, we're going to flip this now to more of a success perspective. So over to you, Andy. What processes and habits do you find across teams generally drive successful outcomes and differentiate organizations from ones that maybe haven't adopted more, modern processes?
Wow, that's a really long question. Honestly, I would say buy-in, investment, and infrastructure. And what I mean by that is buy-in at all levels, not just the top. You have to get buy-in at the IC level and everywhere in between on the outcomes that you're looking for. Because if you don't get that buy-in from an IC, they're not going to want to go through the specific workflows that you want them to, And then if you don't have buy-in at the leadership level, it'll never get off the ground. When it comes from investment, you have to have a company that is willing to invest in not just the AI tools, but all the peripheral pieces to go with it. Because the cost is not just the tokens, the cost is the AWS infrastructure that you have to spin up so that you can have internal tooling, or the people that you have to hire to make sure that your data is in a place where you can actually leverage it for anything meaningful. So those are some of the things that we're doing at Knak to ensure that we can grow ourselves and be able to live in an AI, agentic, whatever you want to call it, world where we're not being left behind, we're pushing from we're leading from the front.
You mentioned buy-in. What's your, if it can be summarized, your leading strategy to secure that buy-in?
Oh, talking everyone's ear off all the time. Because I think when it comes to buy-in, it's like how often it's brought up. If you lose momentum, then you really lose the room. So ensuring that those that should be caring about it know about it and have access to it in order to either execute on it, use it, or be your champion internally for it.
That makes sense. Thank you. Hi, over to yourself. When you see an organization struggling to either build or deploy their AI, where do you see the problem typically lie? Would you say it's with the technology, the process, or the people?
So the question was, if an organization struggles with deploying agents to production, then is it the people or the process or the technology, right? I think at this point, the technology is pretty mature for anyone to build any sort of agents. Like you can build an agent with like 3 lines of code, and you've been able to do that since like 2023. We're talking about like LangGraph and whatever that came out a long time ago. The patterns change so much. Like Hugo said earlier today, initially we built agents that run in like a small runtime, and now we're giving agents like computers to use. Like who knows what the next harness is going to look like? But at the same time, the harnesses are very much the same. If you were to choose Claude or Codex, they're literally the same thing. So a lot of times companies have pockets of people who are trying different things, and nobody agrees on like what is the right way to do it. So that's where like we see some of our customers struggle with, which is, oh, so-and-so is building a POC, and by the way, everyone's on POC, right? So so-and-so is building a POC over here using this technology, and then this other team is building something else over here. Is agent skill like what everyone is betting on as well? So like there's so many different emerging patterns. So our job usually going into these companies that are struggling just to tell them, hey, we'll save you like a couple of weeks worth of work because we see this one pattern that got pushed to production. So you're just gonna follow exactly what we're gonna tell you, and then you'll be okay. Doesn't matter if you choose this one or that one. So again, my answer is it's just a lot of noise, and people are trying a bunch of different things, and there's really no consensus of like what is the right path to move forward to move to production.
So it sounds like you're saying almost a combination of people and process, but less emphasis on the technology.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame it too much on the people because it's the landscape of the industry that we're in that just breeds so many different ways to do the same thing. It's, of course, people are going to be confused.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, opening that one up to the rest of the panel, are there any differing opinions, or are you seeing similar patterns?
I would say people. It's that like messy bit of like people inputting specific things for data that can be leveraged here or there, and training people on the specific process that you need them to follow. Because like you could probably have a perfect world where there's just all agents and like perfect data, but as soon as you put people into it, that's where it gets very messy.
I can appreciate that. What are you saying?
I would say that because workflow automation has been a thing for a long time. It's not like AI is it has changed what it's capable of, but it's not like a new automating things or processes is not something that's completely new. And so organizations that weren't adopting it before are now looking to adopt it with this, so they don't have like the muscle of how do we actually include these and put these into production. So
Yeah, I think at Uber in your talk you touched on this, like everything is moving at such a fast pace that you really need everyone aligned, and the people, the way they approach things is going to change, and processes are going to change, that you kind of just need alignment to bring it all together. And they're probably, all three of them are probably going to continue to be challenges ongoing in different ways. So I thought that'd be a fun one to tackle this evening. All right, we're going to move into our next theme, which is trust and adoption. Obviously, because we're discussing AI this evening, trust is a common theme across all of the fields that you each were speaking about this evening. So let's dive in. Ugo, on your end, when you're working with an organization and you're starting a new project, what do you see as the strongest signs for readiness for adoption versus a company that may not be quite as ready?
Yeah, and I touched upon this a little bit in my talk, is people who understand what problems they're trying to solve, and they can explain it to you in a very simple sentence most of the time, right? So I think if you kind of look at a lot of organizations and what's driving AI adoption or what AI strategy is about, it's typically like some kind of mandates from the C-suites for everyone to adopt, AI and stuff like that. But people who adopt, who look at it from the problem I'm trying to solve perspective, usually are going to be successful because they feel that pain, they understand what it means, they feel it every single day, they understand what step 1 to step 10 or whatever it might be looks like. Those folks are typically going to be successful versus folks who don't quite know what problems they're trying to solve. Because obviously AI is not a silver bullet. So there are problems that you should say no to. This is a deterministic workflow that we should continue to do the way we're doing it, so we don't need to change anything. So when you start sort of messing with those things, then you create more confusion. So I think it's really that piece is the one thing I look forward to when I get into a discovery call. I'm trying to listen to what the champion or whoever it is saying, or what their motivations are. That typically tells me where this is headed to.
I really love that perspective. So it's almost having a pain point strong enough that creates that drive to solve it, and then AI adoption follows. Awesome. All right, so assuming we have an organization that is ready to adopt AI, and let's assume they're already experimenting with AI, how do they take that leap from readiness and experimentation to genuine adoption and in a way that sticks with scale?
Cool. I guess we're going through some of that with customers right now. So the organization is ready to adopt. There's like top-down buy-in, and there's like some buy-in amongst like the people. That's great. What do we do now? Well, we have to scope out a few different things for people to build, right? We can just say, let's build this, boil the ocean. Everything changed overnight. We can't do that. A lot of times it comes down to the first thing to do, which is your data ready? So data means context, right? If you don't have proper data governance or data management, whether that's, is the data accessible to like MCPs? Are you guys using Salesforce? Does everyone in the company have access to that through like MCP? Are you guys using some sort of data warehouse like Databricks or Snowflake? And by the way, Snowflake stocks went up a lot because of all these enterprise AI use cases recently, like 25%. So it's happening, and when people start to realize that, before we can do anything fancy, we have to give people access to like different types of data sources. And when you dive into that, you talk about like data governance, policies, row level security, all that good stuff. So it turns out our job is like mostly helping people scope out quick win projects, and then doing data engineering for like a while, and then paint a picture so that in the future they can aim at something that is our entire business unit, our entire organization can be semantically queried by anybody at the company and by any agents. But we have to work up to that. It'll take potentially several quarters to get there because of like pre-AI problems like data. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Over yourself, Sam. I want to talk a little bit about rollout strategies. So either specific to Coda or your experience at Fellow, how do you approach rolling out new features and capabilities? Do you typically roll out one at a time or multiple at a time, and how does that impact trust and adoption?
Yeah, so for Coda, we started with like a very initial version. We were like experimenting with a lot of different things. But what's interesting is I think engineers, software engineers specifically, kind of got the early preview of like what these models will be able to do. And so like even last year, we were seeing these models being really starting to get really good at coding. And so the transition was all of last year. Coda was kind of a new way of using it, but the actual shift I think happened through all of last year. And not by any, people were almost forced to not buy their own will because these tools have gotten so good. Now there's kind of a pull instead of a push where we're seeing people want to adopt it. Whereas last year I think it was more here's something we need to like top down and try to encourage people to use this. And it's a bit of the opposite now where everyone finds it so useful that they're finding ways to bring it into their own workflows. So for Coda, we started with that initial version and then we added canvases later and it's evolved since then. And it's kind of a collaborative project now where anyone can really maintain it.
Do you find it's changed greatly from your initial vision of what it would be?
It's evolved, definitely. I think the initial, this was around the time when like OpenCloud was getting super popular and we were seeing that and we were like, oh, how can we get some of these at our company? I think there's still, there's companies that are trying to do this and like sell something that does this internally, but I think still it's good to, for that at least, for if you're trying to build a claw or these agents, it's good to try to build them yourself initially to understand what works and what doesn't, and to build that trust in what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, which pieces you can put them into, before relying on a solution, which you can do afterwards, but I think first experiment and understand how they work.
Makes a lot of sense, and looking forward to hear how Coda grows in the next few months and years. All right, Jenna, over to yourself. What are the AI workflows that you notice with your brand building that really stick long term versus ones that are maybe more short-lived or aren't as used as greatly once the initial excitement wears off?
Yeah, I noticed a few patterns. So first of all, shiny object syndrome, people watch YouTube videos, TikTok videos, they're scrolling on LinkedIn, and they see people sharing their own AI workflows, and it's very exciting and you want to build that for yourself right now. But it's not solving a need that you really have, or it's not customized for what you need in your organization, so you try it and abandon it. But that's a great way to get excited about AI, but I find that those don't last. What I suggest is that you think of the most painful part of your job right now, and I'm talking to clients every day or people from my LinkedIn DMs, and a lot of people don't love status updates, they don't love creating reports every week, they're spending tons of time on it. So I suggest building AI workflows there first. You can build AI workflows that do awesome competitive research, but be careful you're not building for something that you actually like about your job. I just started a book called Buy Back Your Time, where it's like, be careful you're not hiring someone that will replace the part of your job you actually love doing, and then you're just left with all the stuff you don't like. So keep that in mind when you're building AI agents. Start with what you actually don't like to do, and those will definitely stick because they're actually helping you out and making you love your day more.
That's a great perspective and really anchoring to Hugo's theme of problem first thinking. Okay, lastly on this theme, over to you, Andy. Assuming that you see AI solutions that are not adopted, why do you think people stop using them?
That's a good question. Reusability, I think. Because I've built stuff that is used and adopted and stuff that isn't. And I found the stuff that has a pattern of reusability shows up more and more for a longer period of time versus just like a point solution that was created at a time for a problem that was there then. And it was a one-off project. So I think reusability is really what resonates in my head right now based on the question. A good example is some analysis that we were doing from GOM for very large swaths of calls and data. that, yeah, there's one use case for the sales team, there's one use case for product, there's one use case for CS, and you can leverage that data across the entire organization. And that's the kind of stuff that burns longer versus, I don't know, a random agent that like pushes something into Slack when a thing happens.
Makes sense, thank you. All right, moving on to our final theme, which is taking a look at the biggest opportunities ahead for AI over the next few years. And Andy, I'll go right back to you for this one. What capability do you think organizations are most greatly underestimating today that will become commonplace?
I think it's twofold. I think this is a really big question. And there's like a lot that's going on in AI, and like I don't even know what's going to happen next month. Like not even like the next couple of years. But how I think about it is two things. I think local models are going to become way more prevalent in the coming future with the, like, because it was the Uber thing of it's really cheap inference of these language models, and then it's going to go up, and it'll just be cheaper to do it locally. And as well, the ability and the context you can give to a local model that is purpose-built for your business is one thing. The second thing is probably leveraging like really cheap models for things that don't need expensive things. Like some of the things, like some of the agents that I run that are my favorite are little haiku models that do these little things. And they're just so reliable, and they do the thing and they get it done. And I think people spend a little bit too much time at like the frontier models getting it done when it could really just be done with a very cheap thing.
Okay, and based on that, I'm curious, do you think that will change the AI products that organizations are delivering, or are you more leaning towards it's going to change how we're building them or how they're backed?
I'm thinking from like an internal perspective. And like if you were to ask me 3 months ago this question, maybe 4 months ago, I would have been like, oh, everyone's gonna have their own open claw, and like when you're onboarded to a new company, you're gonna be onboarding that open claw as well and sharing that context. And now I'm like, I don't think that'll happen. But yeah, I think from the internal perspective, that is like the best thing that I can say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sam, over to you again, possibly about Coda. Big fan. What responsibilities do you think an AI teammate would be trusted with 3 years from now? So something you maybe considered for a second with Coda and thought, no, we're not ready for that, but in 3 years you may be willing to hand off to Coda.
Yeah, so today we kind of took a very guarded approach of like what we're allowing it to do, what channels we're letting it into, and kind of rolled that out. But I think probably in the near future, like in the next year or two, we won't. Right now, there's a lot of hesitation around shipping code that no one has actually looked at. I think like that when you have a closed loop, if you have something that has demonstrated that it works, it's been tested, you'll have something that follows up once it's been deployed and checks whether there's errors, looks at the logs, and iterates on it. I think there's going to be less. You will be able to trust it more with actually shipping things that haven't necessarily even been reviewed by a human, especially starting with small things. And then looking more broadly at AI teammates in general, not just Coda. And this we've been thinking a lot about because we're in the meetings space, but I do think like in the next 3 years, we're going to start seeing, you'll be discussing something in a meeting, I'll be talking to you, and we'll try to figure out what should happen or what we should do. And maybe we won't have a clear owner defined for it, and it'll flag that. And then by the time we reach the end of the meeting, an agent has already like picked up on that conversation, done a first initial pass at it for us to review. I think that's going to become a lot more common, where you have this kind of an ambient intelligence, where it's working in the background, not something that you're actively looking at, but it brings you things. Yeah, I think that's very hard to predict because things change so fast that
That would be great though, flagging operational inefficiencies before they happen.
Yeah.
Strong use case there. Awesome, thank you. All right, Ugo, over to yourself. I want to ask you about the future of agent networks. So what do you think the future in delivering agent networks might look like when we're talking about multi-agent systems across numerous business domains, interacting with one another, maybe with lesson orchestrating system. I don't know how many years down the road that is, but what do you think that might look like, and what do you think some of the biggest challenges with it might be?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because I think the concept of agent swarms has been kind of percolating somewhere. I think the way these harnesses work right now, they are remarkably great at planning, which is such a very important thing when it comes to like multi-agent work. So, being able to sort of orchestrate between multiple agents, hand task over a certain agent once it's done. We're seeing like incredible uptake in what they're able to do in that regard. So it's very, very difficult to predict how this goes. Because maybe the one agent harness can spin up like multiple agents. It's doing that right now already, right? Spin up multiple agents, get the task done. So I think I go back to thinking about getting a task done. I think we're going to see more and more tasks get uploaded to an agent harness, which could be a single agent or multiple agents working in tandem, but very difficult to think about beyond that level, what like an agent's network is going to look like. I mean, there are a few concerns already when we think about an agent network. I mean, we had the Moles bot. I think everyone was it Moles book. I think that's an experiment in what a multi-agent network could look like, and didn't quite go well. We saw like some crazy stuff come out of that. So
Have you tried Gastown or?
no, I haven't.
Dynamic workflows?
Yes. So I think anywhere headed in that direction, I think it's going to be gradual. And I think the guardrails, though, the guardrails need to be tight. We need to invest more in guardrails, I think, before we can talk about like really extensive networks of agents let loose to go do stuff.
Yeah, it's a bold question for sure, and I think it's going to progressively build, and as it does that, it will take shape in hopefully a secure way.
Hopefully.
All right, Jenna, shifting over to yourself, I want to talk a little bit about human communication. So curious from your perspective, what aspect of human communication do you think AI is still lacking? And do you think it will eventually come around and adopt that missing piece? And if it does, what does that mean for brands?
I think we've seen like a recent shift in offline events and community becoming more popular because partly because of all the AI stuff out there, so people aren't really connecting online anymore because they don't trust if your LinkedIn post was AI generated. And people just want to meet in real life more because we're just so used to the internet just becoming this AI playground. So I don't think that AI will be able to completely replace that aspect, nor should it, because I personally want to talk to people face to face. But I'm hoping that, I think right now we're seeing people start to ignore AI-generated marketing content more and more, but that's because it's lacking that context, it's lacking taste, it's not very good. And I'm hoping that as people learn how to create these context libraries and they learn how to use AI more effectively to pull from their first-person data and all that context that they hold, that their AI content will get better and we will eventually learn to trust it and be able to communicate with each other even if it's AI assisted because we know it's genuinely coming from experience and our expertise, and then we can still connect offline, which I hope and don't see AI replacing.
Yeah, that's a great response. I think even if we do overcome some gaps in how AI is communicating, it's in human nature to want to still just connect person to person. I was chatting with Nelda when this evening started, and she's creating these incredible videos recapping what's going on in AI, and I told her it was the funniest thing because you're talking about AI, but I want to hear you talk about it human to human. So I think that's gonna, continue down that road. All right, our final question that I have for this evening is for yourself. Hi. If we're having this conversation 3 years from now, what do you think would surprise this audience most about how AI has changed the way organizations operate?
I have an idea. So we have a few companies in our network that have been talking about there's a subset of customers they have that is going all out on building internal agents, and they don't have an appetite for buying SaaS products that have a user interface anymore. So if they were to buy any product, it has to come with an MCP server, it has to come with a public API that they can just integrate with the Coda, whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So you want your Coda to be more powerful. You don't want your employees to go onto another dashboard to do an SSO and to do login. So essentially you want everything to one place. That coupled with a few other things that have been in development for a while, in terms of like agent-to-agent communication, payment, transactions and that stuff. I think 3 years from now, we'll be talking to agents in our day-to-day business without even knowing that. And we'll probably have a good time doing that too. Because agents, AI models in general, are very patient and they hopefully negotiate with good faith. People sometimes have a spectrum of where they could be in terms of like, whether or not they want your best interest in the negotiation. Amazon, for example, or I think Walmart, they have put in place an agent that does negotiation with their vendors, and from their survey, people actually prefer to negotiate with the agent than the human rep. So I think it's going to be a lot of agent-to-agent interactions in the future. Micro transactions, could involve payment. Companies are going to have to struggle with whether or not to build a product headlessly or to continue building a platform. I would be very curious to see where a fellow will be, whether fellow is going to be the same, meeting note taker, you go into a dashboard, you see the activities, or is it going to be an agent that will take over my entire company? Because most of the context comes from your meetings and your transcripts. So I think that's you guys' world domination plan.
Do you want to speak to that, Sam?
I mean, definitely, we've seen a lot of the market that is asking, obviously, for API, MCPs, CLIs. I do think that's where software, a lot of like SaaS software is headed, is you're going to be using it through, like your experience with SaaS is going to be mediated through this agent interface. So yeah, we'll start seeing things move that way, but I think people are still visual. There's some things that you can actually just do quicker when you can see like a layout, like it's not all going to be text. So I think there's going to be some, the companies that do well are going to be the ones that adopt that like agent first. We talked about building software, like even internally, we had our summit last week, and internally we were talking about we need to build software for agents as much as for humans. So that means, yeah, good tooling, working well with open standards, which is funny because that's a lot of stuff that was engineers were saying before that we needed to do. We need to have a good API, but now we're doing that, but for agents. So.
Awesome, thank you. All right, that wraps up the questions that I had for this evening. So I would love to open it up to the floor. If there's any questions while we have our panelists. Yeah, please go ahead.
First of all, great job. I was trying to understand how any of this becomes a product, because right now you're describing everything that you built. It's like very bespoke, and you need to do a ton of workflow mapping and all that kind of stuff. So I'd just be curious from the group, you can speak to like how you're envisioning some of this becoming a product long term versus just something you build it out or reach out to a consulting company to help you build it.
Anyone ready to take this one?
I'll jump on it just because I started my talk by saying everything I do is more out of frustration of the tools that I'm working with, and that they just can't do the thing that I need them to do. And so honestly, anything that I build isn't about processing it. It's just about being able to improve the workflows that I'm working through, the workflows the teams that I support. Because I'm coming from the enablement perspective of like, enablement for me is helping teams to do their jobs better in any way, shape, or form. And right now, in this paradigm, it's leveraging AI and automations to get it done. And so for me, it's really about improving the outputs overall versus processing.
I'll add something to that. So with Coda, it was something we built internally. At some point we were thinking, is this something that others would find useful? But we use Cursor, some of the team uses Cursor. Cursor added their, they call them their automations, which is kind of agents. Notion has agents as well that you can set up. Anthropic obviously added, they added Cloud managed agents, it's called, and I think OpenAI has one as well. So any kind of these products that if you're trying to do it as a product, it's going to be very difficult to find how to differentiate from some of these offerings where they have the model. And I think the actual difficult part is the implementation of it, like putting it into the real world, putting it into real workflows and actually having it do real work. And so I think that, yeah, as a product, it may not make sense. Coda, at least, is not something that will be like productizing, but it is something that I would encourage people to try to do for themselves. And I think a lot of companies will, and we see a lot of companies doing that.
Yes, and I believe there's a mic coming for you.
Thank you for doing this. This is awesome. Question from your perspective, since you guys have done this already, for organizations that are still a little bit hesitant about fully implementing AI into their work processes and so forth. Before you take that giant big leap of finally adopting AI into your organizations, one of the biggest hurdles that leadership seems to have is this cost associated with AI and what value is it going to add versus investing those same amount of resources into human beings. So do you guys have any tips on how to evaluate that and de-risk it if possible from your experience? Because I'm all for AI, but trying to sell it to leadership sometimes can be a bit of a challenge.
I can take the cost angle to it. I think that cost is becoming something that is top of mind for everyone right now when it comes to AI. I think there's this concept of sovereign AI, which is beginning to sort of emerge. So we have Cohere, Mistral, and a few other open source companies that are beginning to create basically tooling that allows you to train your own model, with your own data hosted on your own infrastructure. And we're finding that that is becoming something that allows you to alleviate the cost concerns. In terms of evaluating what's right for sort of automation, because I think it's still automation. So I think AI makes it feel a little bit distant, but it's really automation. And I think the same principles apply, and everyone has sort of touched upon it. And I really love what you said earlier on about automating the aspects of your job you don't like. And I think that's a really good principle to take back to leadership, to say there are things that we do on a day-to-day that we just don't like doing because it's just a waste of time. Or it's just repetitive, it's not me using my brain in a certain way or whatever it might be. And those things are right for automation with AI and other automation tools. So I gave the example earlier on for fund analysis. Nobody really likes reading like 10K reports or 10K reports or anything like that. So AI happens to be something that can, or your agent happens to be something that can read that. So I think it's finding those specific things that people don't quite like doing and starting with those. And I think you get buy-in faster that way.
I can answer the part where you asked about ROI for your executive team. There are a couple ways to think about it. So the way we approach our customers' problems is that we break it down to two buckets. So is it an efficiency problem or is it an excellency problem? So efficiency means you implement some sort of tool that allows you to do the same thing over and over faster. And excellency means, okay, so we get that out of place or out of the way and some of the things done. What are some of the things that you know you should be doing, you haven't been doing because you don't have time? If those behaviors start to emerge, then we ask our customers to note them down And that is, you know, okay, so now all of a sudden, instead of you filling out your CRM or whatever, you spend that time going to trade shows. That's like a completely different thing. Last quarter, we didn't do these things, but we knew we had to do them. This quarter, we can. So that's a clear win if you were to implement AI in the last quarter. And the second thing is, I was having this conversation with Ugo a couple of days ago, actually. You just want a really good task board, and then you can tie your agents to those things. And it makes it easier for like a development or engineering team to do that because the tasks are pretty clear. But if you're in design, if you're in something that has deliverables, if you can tie those agents into those tasks and track them using like Linear or Jira, you can kind of like aggregate them over time and see like how much influence do these AI tools have over like the tasks being done. And you can also like correlate the amount of time those tasks being done compared to them being done in the past. There's so many ways to do it, and you can also use off-the-shelf software to track usage, which is obviously not a good way to track, you know, ROI. And finally, I want to say that if your organization wants to have an OKR about AI, you don't want to make it about AI. You want to tie it to your bottom line or whatever OKR you guys have, and then track it from there instead of like we want 20% efficiency or whatever. It's hard to track it, and also like why 20% or 30%? No, you're not, because you probably heard somebody said we want 30% more efficiency. Yeah. Compared to what?
Of course, another question over here. Yeah.
Thank you for the session, it was amazing. My question is about AI agents in production. So when you deploy agents in production, especially in industries with very low risk tolerance like finance or healthcare, how do you measure reliability? How do you make sure that it's reliable? And is it even possible with today's agents?
So when it comes to measuring reliability, I think it starts way before it gets into production, right? You want to do as much evals, as they say. And I think you have to sort of almost build your way back from what those evaluations. It's like test-driven development, right? You define what's good looks like, and then you walk your way back from there. You need to have really good observability because things are going to break, things are going to go wrong, so you want to be able to catch them when they happen. In terms of style of evaluation, in terms of whether this needs to go into production or not, I think people have different styles. You might have a human as the judge, you can have LLM or even deterministic code as the judge before you put things into production. But I think you have to have, you know, constantly evaluate and see where the levels are at. And then there are certain use cases that absolutely need a human in the loop before they go out. So having someone who's going to take a look at this draft that has been created, and we use the word draft a lot in a lot of things. AI creates a first draft so that you can put the rest, you take the rest of the line. So those are some of the thoughts that I have about that question.
Yeah, and I would just add on the evals, just the double importance of that. Because when you're putting something into production, yes, you need to be monitoring, you need to add that loop to make sure that if something breaks, that you're fixing it at the source. Or if you have a bad evaluation, that you add that to your training set. But the other reason is also, you know, cost. Or when a new model comes out and the model costs twice as much, is it going to be twice as good for your use case? Or can you actually use, you know, haiku for this agent and it'll work fine? Or you open source model. So without the eval, you don't have any of that, and so that you need to start there really to have a good idea of how it's working.
And just to build on that, I might go through the whole panel for you, but just to build on that, a really great approach is progressive autonomy. So deploying agents, you know, if your agent, you think of it as they can make a recommendation, make a decision, or take an autonomous action. You can start on the lower end of that range, and then through evals, measure your system quality, and if you're seeing quality outputs in the recommendations it's making, you can then take the next step to allowing the agent to decide, and then again, you can assess how they're performing at that level, and then move it on to autonomous action or action with human in the loop. Okay, I think there was another question in front, yes.
of all, great event. Thank you. So, was wondering, out of the collective experience of the panel, in terms of automating workflows, when you're
so the question is, when automating workflows, I've heard that the process where you don't necessarily sort of copy the human version of it, but you rather redesign it to be more machine friendly, it has been more effective. But this is kind of hearsay that I read from a few different articles. Just curious, based on the experience, like how much of it has been workflow analysis and then just implementing it by using AI instead of humans to do it, versus how much of it is actually business process design from scratch almost.
So a lot of my work I find is when I do AI audits and I'm working with someone to turn one of their existing workflows into an AI workflow, they'll have a lot of light bulb moments where they're like, this is probably not a necessary step. I'm not doing this as efficiently as it could be manually right now. So a lot of the added benefit of creating these AI workflows is you're kind of auditing the actual business processes at the same time and maybe even rebuilding them. So I think that's a great point, that it sometimes shouldn't just be a one-to-one step of like human now with AI. It's a good opportunity to make sure that you're doing things as efficiently as possible, because maybe something you're doing now isn't necessary and it'll cost a ton in tokens and you can just get rid of it. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hey, great session. Glad to be here and hearing so much inspiring things. My question is about, in practice, around benchmarking of what your companies currently do. How much % of work do you allow agents to do independently without a human in the loop, and how do you see that evolving?
Well, okay, let's think. I think, it's really going to depend on what the solution is, would be my initial perspective. Does anyone want to take this on?
Yeah, I'll just speak to it quickly. I have not got to a place where I feel fully comfortable with all of the workflows that I'm currently running being without human in the loop. In that even the ones that are like looped and autonomous to themselves, I still audit on occasion, because there is things and changes that happen in code or production that can affect it in different ways, that you might find that something that has been running like a top for a long time now is just burning tokens because of some issue. And so I haven't got to a point of fully trusting it, but we're going to panelists and be able to say something different.
I mean, we had a funny example, well, not funny in retrospect, but with Coda, there was a bug in the way that we had done the heartbeat, where it was kind of extending the context window over time. And somebody on the team had added a workflow for it where when somebody shipped a feature, they would shout them out and give them like kudos. And it was running every couple minutes to check, and so it was actually adding to that. And we noticed a few days later when we looked at the cost, and it had racked up like a lot. So yes, there's cases where you need to be auditing, you need to be checking, spot checking at least. But I think a lot of easier, maybe customer success customer issue questions can be answered. A lot of like the more simpler cases can be done without any oversight, or without any with the guardrails in place, without any checking from a human.
I want to add to that. So all the workflows that we have at our company that are read-only, we usually just let it rip autonomously. If it's a write task, then we would have human in the loop. So it's like one door, two doorways decisions, right? Like if it's a go read task, you're not going to be catastrophic if something goes wrong. If it's a write task, then a lot of times it could be catastrophic. So that's where we would see, decide whether or not we want to let it just run autonomously. But I do have Codex took over my Mac Mini, and I think it's very dangerous. But it's running it right now, and it has taken over all my social media. If you're talking to me on LinkedIn, you're not talking to me. And it reads all my emails, it runs on a schedule. I think over time people are going to be more comfortable doing that. But it's not replying to you, by the way. That's why. That's the one thing that I'm not letting it do, which is it can read everything, but it can't reply.
I want to add to that, because I do also do that kind of stuff, is it's about your appetite for risk. So I personally am willing to take a little bit of risk if it means that I can do a lot more faster. So sometimes it does screw up and I expect that. But when you're working with a human, it's the same thing. You don't just fire someone after the first mistake. You train them and then you try again and you maybe audit them a little bit more frequently for short term after. But yeah, there's been some cases where my AI agent has said the wrong thing and I just go in there and say, oops, I'm transparent about it. I'm like, oops, that was my AI agent. They said the wrong thing. Here's the actual right answer. But I'll have to fix that. So sorry about that. So if you're comfortable with that, which I am to a certain degree, as long as it's not like a catastrophic result, then expect that.
Jenna, how often do you see that happening?
Once a week.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Any more questions? Yes, please go ahead.
So, amazing session, loved it. And so my question is specifically to Jenna. So you mentioned you were making your own agents and you were posting them in LinkedIn, and I suppose that were like all of those were your personal projects. And now it's your full-time, right? So my question is, how much has it changed in terms of processes, tools, limitations while working for people or clients? And if you could suggest someone who's taking the same path, how much it has challenged you, like how much you had to broaden your knowledge, and like how much it challenged you, honestly. Like, we really want to know how much you pushed yourself out there to make it work.
Yeah, 100%. So this time last year, I was not technical. I never even touched code or anything like that. So I've learned this all in a year. Life has changed a lot, so it's been very rewarding, but you do have to keep up quickly. But to answer your first question about my personal workflows versus, working one-to-one with clients now, that goes back to what I just said. I have a higher appetite of risk for myself. But, clients are not as down for letting their agents run because they have a bigger brand to protect and customers to protect. So one thing I learned going into it at the beginning is to be aware of the security hurdles, which I went in there and I was like, okay, we're going to build all these things. It's be great. Security said no. And that was my first experience working one-to-one with clients. So make sure they're coming in with lots of information about, if it's read only, then they're usually more comfortable with that. And if you're going into right territory where it takes an action on behalf of you, then tell them, what kind of other information it might have access to, personal information about customers or the organization. Make sure you know this before you start building, or you might waste a lot of time, which I did, and I had to learn that hard lesson. And as far as growing my LinkedIn account, I make these lead magnets pretty much like once a week, and they get between 2,000 to 10,000 comments, and I make them in an hour. And it has the whole reason why I grew my business so fast. So I would very much recommend creating these context libraries and finding your own point of view and your own experience and turning it into a repeatable format on LinkedIn as an actual template or resource that you can share. Because people really want something that's like plug and play. And I find that helps to build trust with your audience fastest.
Okay, we have another question over here.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about cost of maybe not maintenance, because we deploy the agent. It's easy to deploy the agent, right? Make it running, but then the technology evolves quite fast in the AI space, right? We need to keep up with that, like updates, new models on the jets. How in enterprise deployments, you solve those problems, or maybe what part of the budget is allocated for this type of the work? Is there any a rule that you follow?
I think first and foremost, for organizations who are trying to solve a particular problem, they can ascribe a certain value to what that problem represents to them. So, as an example, a marketing use case might not be the same as something that is more operational to you. So I'm working with an organization as an example who their core business is processing medical records. That is the core business. So that So there is always that conversation to be had. You know, most consultants will do this with you and kind of get into a room, figure that out, put it on a budget, and kind of explain to you what the cost should look like. But I think the beauty of what's happening, and I think I was discussing this earlier, we started off as an example with a 237 billion parameter model as a starting point. And once we sort of got to, okay, end-to-end works, we were able to go back and refine and fine-tune a 7 billion parameter model that was able to still do the same task. So the beauty of it is, whatever that budget is right now can still go down, whatever that cost is can still go down, but you have to continuously refine and find areas to cut costs. But it's this topic poll, but again, it's a value question really in terms of like how you kind of figure out what the budget is. And some people might see maybe a separate process to automate as something that doesn't add that much value to them, and they might not ascribe the same, they might not be willing to kind of allocate the same budget to that particular task. So it's that kind of conversation that we have with organizations in determining what kind of budget they allocate to a certain project.
Any more questions? One more over here.
Thanks everyone. We're hearing a lot about evals on one side, and then I also feel that there's a push for making people AI champions and allowing people to build things that solve their problems and build proof of concepts. How do you go from those proof of concepts from non-engineers to systems that have evals that you can test that work? Are you seeing people within the organization that aren't engineers building those evals and evaluating those? Or are you jumping in with engineers to take something that wasn't kind of built with all that ahead of time and kind of backfilling that?
That is why we have I had that we're hiring slide on at the end. I think there's some. So one thing we thought of was to do an AI council, which is like a group of 3 or 4 people within the company that we've identified as having the technical skills to be able to actually put these into production to build the evals. And that's still in the kind of early stages, so I don't have any better answers than that, except yes, it's important, and there's a gap there from like, yes, a prototype that somebody has put into place and making that repeatable with evals. I think what we have today.
Yeah, I'll take it quickly. Coming from a place of like always never being like highly technical, in that understanding code and being able to write code, coming into Knak and being able to build with Claude Code quickly and prototype very quickly was great. And then what helped me was working with the devs and the engineers that were willing to tell me, it's like, hey, you actually don't need to do it that way. And a really great example of if you're doing it this way is using a helicopter across the street. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. I don't need to over-engineer, overbuild. And so being able to rely on those folks to guide the way, because you can do so much with Claude Code, but there are a lot of efficiencies and knowledge that devs and engineers know that a layman might not just know how to do from the start.
I just want to add to that as well, because I think it's such a very important point. One of the things AI does is obviously to democratize access to doing some awesome stuff. And I've seen some amazing builds from people you would classify as non-technical. And honestly, I would say that right now, domain knowledge is very critical to building something that is valuable. So when people can prototype and bring their domain expertise to things, it makes the life of the engineer much easier, because what you're basically optimizing for is, can it run at scale, is it efficient, things of that nature. So I think very important to continue to encourage folks within our organizations to continue building now that it's much easier to build, because you can't, it's not always easy to replicate that through a Jira board with tickets trying to explain the context of someone's domain expertise.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Sorry if I can speak.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm from a longer-standing company than I think probably many of you out there are. And so we have some technical debt and a lot of business systems. And my question to you is, what percentage of your businesses run on the more traditional business systems? Like, what does your tech stack look like? Do you still use a financial tool? Do you still use a CRM? Or are you building most of this stuff inside, since you can be a little bit more fluid?
Oh man, that's a really good question. There is a really great debate about build versus buy, and I think like infrastructure, you buy, your intelligence you can build, and there's a lot of variation between there of like what makes sense for what purpose. But I'm definitely not trying to remake a CRM or replicate Snowflake or anything like that. But when it comes to understanding our customers from our point of view and our context, that is something that we can build internally. And I wouldn't go pay someone else to do that if I can do that myself. Because the context that we have internally is just so much greater than anyone that might come to you and say, hey, we can do this for you. You work in what space? SaaS space in general. So this is like the blanket way we're going to do it versus like a highly custom that you can do yourself.
I want to add to that as well. So I can also tell you what stack we use at our company, AGI Ventures. We put all, like 90% of our stuff on Notion. I don't know if you're familiar with Notion. People would call it a note taker, but it's technically a database. And you can do automations, now you can put agents on it. You can use Claude agents to enter Notion and do a bunch of stuff in there. So we've been able to build our CRM, our accounting, our meetings, note-taking stuff, our context graph of every single customer and conversations we have with them. So every time I hop off a call, my agent will look at the transcript and then goes inside of the customer's page in our Notion, update only the things that we care about them. So over time, everybody on the team, if they wanted to continue the conversation, they could just go to that one page about the company. And even we go down deep to even the level of if we were to talk to like a VP or whatever at that company, it writes down their tone of voice, what they preferred the communication preference looks like, whether they're like brevity or like verbose, where they're from. It's kind of like over the top, but essentially, we want everybody in the company to go into every conversation with complete context about who they're talking to and how they should be talking to them and what was the last thing to talk about. And yeah, so we built everything in Notion. The reason why we use Notion is because it's like that middle point between engineering and non-technical people. So Notion, they call it internally, Notion, they call it Lego blocks for building whatever you want. Recently they made it so that their platform is now a developer platform, which essentially just means that your agents can interact with Notion freely. Just like how I think Fallow is also thinking about building their product for agents. We call it agent experience. So yeah, you can go crazy like us and just build everything internally. Or you, like you said, like any infrastructure, you buy it, intelligence and context, you can build that yourself. Yeah.
All right, last call for any final questions. Okay. I think we will probably wrap up there then. A huge thank you to our panelists for speaking this evening. And I'll just pass it off to Hai to wrap up for this evening.
Thanks everybody for coming out. We would love it if you guys give us some feedbacks after this, because this is our first event. The second event will be in July, and it depends on whether or not you guys like it. So we would really appreciate it if you give us some feedbacks, what else you want to hear about. If you do want to speak at our events, come talk to me or Nelda or any of our team members or Tori, and we'll put your name down, and then maybe you can speak at our next event. We have a community as well, so like it's on LinkedIn and Slack. Is there anything else you want to
post on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so recently we have Nelda had bought a banner for us, so if you guys want to take photos, please tag us in social media, and our company's name is just AGI Ventures Canada. The reason why I say all this is because new initiatives and new meetups, they're very fragile, and it really requires the entire village to keep it alive. So if you do like this, please do all the things that I just told you, and maybe we'll have another one in July and another one in August. And I think we have big plans for this year. We're going to have a conference with content like this. So thanks everybody on the panel. Thank you, Tori, for doing an amazing job emceeing this. And yeah, that's the event. Thank you guys for coming.